This is the Big Woods Bucks podcast. Come explore the big woods and timber in North America with your host, Maine Master Guide and deer tracking expert Hal Blood. Listen to Hal and co-hosts Lee Libby and Joe Cruzy as they unlock the secrets of big woods whitetails. Each episode will provide valuable insights into the tried and true system Hal has used for the last 40 years to scout, locate, and hunt mature big woods bucks. Listen and laugh as the crew discusses Hal's legendary adventures and learn how to apply a lifetime's worth of lessons from the big woods to your own hunting and outdoor adventures.
Welcome to the Big Woods Bucks podcast. I'm your host, Hal Blood, sitting right here with Joe Cruzy.
Hello.
And Mike Stevens.
How you doing?
He's filling in for Lee Libby, who's on vacation, I guess. He won't tell us where he's at, but...
Guy's always on vacation.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking that, too. He's either snowmobiling, he's always doing something, but... Anyways, Mike can fill his shoes plenty.
Yeah, I can fill them okay.
Yeah.
Fill them with something.
So, this week, we've got team member Jim Bernardin. He's going to talk to us about, Jim is guide in Maine and hunted in the big woods for all his life, I guess, and now he's moved out to Wyoming to do some guiding, and I guess he likes the weather there better or something, or his wife does. But so anyways, welcome, Jim.
Well, it's good to be aboard.
Yeah.
Morning, everybody. It's a snowy morning out here in Wyoming.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I got about 2 inches of snow last night.
Oh, yeah. The winter doesn't want to give up, does it?
No, you've got you don't want to take a long nap during July because you might miss summer.
Yeah. Well, we still got snow in the woods here. It's hung on about as long as I can remember in a while. You know, it just finally Sunday and Monday we had a couple of 65-degree days, and it licked it down. But last weekend, Jim, I did it my first deer clinic, and we could go in the woods a little, but like on the south sides and stuff of the ridges, but there was still places you couldn't even walk through it, you know?
Yeah, it was. I heard it was a tough one.
Yeah.
We didn't have a lot of snow out here, but it was wicked cold in February. We had probably 15 nights that were between 5 and 25 below.
Oh, yeah.
What part of Wyoming are you in, Jim?
We're up in northwestern. We're west of Cody, just outside Yellowstone National Park.
Okay, so are you anywhere near Togety then?
Well, no, that would be southwest of us. Togety Pass is west of Du Bois.
Okay.
Togety Pass is between Du Bois and Jackson Hole.
Right.
So we're actually north of that. If you can picture the extreme northwest corner of where Yellowstone is, we're just east of the park.
Okay.
So you're not too far from Montana, right?
No. If my wife wants to do major shopping, we go up to Billings. They have pretty much everything. They have everything you need in Cody as far as shopping and medical care and so forth. But if you want to get serious and, do the big deal and go to a fancy restaurant, you go up to Billings, Montana.
Well, I got you.
Billings is our Skowhegan?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Cody is our Presque Isle. When we lived in Oxbow, Cody is our Presque Isle, and Billings is our Bangor.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
Makes sense.
That's how we relate to stuff around here. Thanks, Jim.
And you don't say how far. You say 2 hours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nothing is ever, because this is big country out here, and everything's 2 hours.
Yeah. That's 2 hours to just plan on it. Just a quick drive.
Oh yeah. That's just to go get a jug of milk.
Yeah. Well, you got to think about it. Them people live down in Los Angeles and stuff. They have a 2-hour commute to work, but it's only 10 miles.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
God bless them.
Yeah.
I was telling the guys a minute ago if I ever did leave, Wyoming would be on the top of the list. I think you picked a good spot to be in out there.
Well, it's interesting. An old friend of mine named Tom Asbo, who used to own Bow Lodge, he's thinking of coming up here.
Oh,
So, he's actually going to come up this summer and visit us and cruise around, and he's possibly interested in getting into an outfitting business. I don't know why in the world he'd want to do that, but
Yeah, you better talk him out of that,
I
Jim.
guess he likes losing money. I don't know.
Yeah, me too. That's why I started again.
I know. Yeah. Well, you got to got to get rid of some of that cash that's overflowing out of your pocket.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The outfitting business, that's a quick way to do it.
Yeah, that's how you do it. You know, when you want to make money outfitting, when you want to make a little bit of money, you start with a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
So true.
One of my clients have several times asked me about how it's like to be a guide, and I said, it's a good job if you can afford it. between your four-wheelers and your trucks and up and buying clothing and all that and burning gas, if you can afford it, it's a good job.
Yeah.
So you've got, as far as game goes, you've got everything we have here plus the elk. Then that would be the biggest difference.
Gosh, Joe, we have of course we have elk, we have whitetail and mule deer, we have moose, bighorn sheep, mountain goat, antelope, black bear. We have grizzlies. We don't have a season on them. We've got just about everything. My wife and I sometimes will take a ride, and in one day, it's not uncommon for us to see bighorn sheep, mule deer, elk, bison, and bears all just in one little ride. And that's outside of the park. Quite honestly, you see more game outside the park than you do in the park, because the wolves have really done a number on the elk in the park.
Oh, yeah.
We see more elk here outside the park because we can hunt wolves here.
Yeah, good.
So,
you think the people in charge would see what's going on there, but they love the touting that it's just nature and let them kill them all anyway.
Yeah, just let nature take its go. Well, I had a discussion, I'll phrase it that way, with a lady one time about wolves, and she said, wolves are a part of the natural order of things. And I said, ma'am, we disrupted the natural order of things starting 200 years ago.
Exactly. We're part of the natural order too, I thought.
Yeah, we are. I mean, we're predators. But we do have a wolf season. We were supposed to have a grizzly season last year, and a federal judge in Montana put a stop to it.
Yeah, that's nice.
This one guy decided to put them back on the endangered species, but it's all about. And of course, the natives, or by that I mean the Lakota and the Shoshone, the tribes are opposed to grizzly hunting because that's the bear is sacred to them.
Regarding the that grizzly bear hunt, and it was like one person can unilaterally make that decision, and obviously, he's a judge, he's put into a high position, but it is crazy to think something so important for conservation and wildlife out there, and one guy.
Well, and I'll tell you, fellows, how conservative Wyoming Game and Fish Service it was. There were going to be 8. The mortality was set for 8 bears. That's in about a 6,000 square mile area. 8 bears. And on top of that, the first sow that was killed, the season would shut down. So if the very first bear killed was a sow, that was going to be it.
Wow.
And yet they couldn't even accept that.
Yeah, crazy.
So, it is.
Yep. Well, let's talk about deer hunting, Jim. What do you think about that?
I've had a mild interest in that for a little while.
Yeah, you've had the interest probably longer than me because you're older than me. You and Mike are the only 2 guys on the team older than me. Everybody calls me the old man, but really I'm not the old man.
He loves bringing that up whenever he can too.
I know, yeah. You just got to rub it in, don't it?
Oh, yeah, he does.
Yeah. How old are you now, Jim?
I'm 70.
Wow.
Holy cow, Jim.
Yeah, I know. Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
I never met anybody that old.
How old are you?
Kids.
Yeah.
No respect.
Yeah.
No, the utmost respect, Jim. You know that.
Yeah.
Jeez, you don't have to be so serious, Mike. Come on.
I am. I'm a serious guy. You know.
I have the utmost respect.
Well, it dawned on me a few days ago that I'm eligible for Social Security now.
Oh, gosh, isn't that awful?
Yeah.
61? 62?
62.
Oh, my God. I thought you were 61.
Yeah.
Well, I met Hal when right before Deb was throwing a 50th birthday party for him.
That's right. I remember that. That's right.
Yeah. I came to Hal's Deer Clinic because, I'm a firm believer that a guy can always learn something. I don't care how much you think you know. You can always learn something. And it's one of the best things I ever did because in addition to picking up a few tips from Hal, I got to get to know him and know that one thing is for sure, Hal Blood is the real deal when it comes to hunting big woods bucks. I don't know if you fellows are too young to remember, there was a baseball pitcher named Dizzy Dean, played for the St. Louis Cardinals, and I think he won 30 games 3 times, and he used to have a saying, "It ain't bragging if you can do it." And
Good. Yeah.
that's
Cool.
yeah, it ain't bragging if you can do it. So I started deer hunting as soon as it was permissible, and killed my first buck when I was that was my first deer when I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
And
Same as me. Was that in Maine?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Where did you grow up in Maine? I never did know that.
Stetson.
Yeah.
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 Over there, east of, west of, north of Dexter, and
Right.
west of Bangor.
Yeah.
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 So that's
Yeah,
how
and
you.
I had an old, borrowed my uncle's 30-30. He was with me. Had an old, of course, everybody in those days, they carried a Model 94.
Yeah.
Either that or some of the old timers had, you remember the old Remington 141,
Yeah.
the pump, the 35 Remington?
Oh,
Saw a lot of
sure.
them in the
Yeah.
woods.
Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, that was before came before the 760, and then of course the 7600. And I had my dad had a 308, was just a little bit too much gun for me, so I borrowed my uncle's. My uncle let me use his 30-30,
Yeah.
and it was. He was just a cow horn spike, but I'll tell you, there was no talking to me after I shot him. I was
Yep.
just, I was 12 years old and I had it all figured out.
Yeah. You'd arrived, didn't you?
Yeah, I had arrived.
That's exactly the same as me, Jim. That's kind of funny. I shot mine first deer, and it happened to be a buck, because back then we could shoot anything, but it was a spike.
Yeah.
It was a spike horn. I was 12 years old with a 30-30 Winchester. It was my father's, and he let me use it. He had to borrow a gun from my uncle so he could let me use that one, and that's how I got started. And then I shot a doe next year, and I was really a big shot then,
I'm right with you guys on that one. I shot my deer with a 32.
Oh, yeah.
Borrowed from my uncle,
Oh, yeah.
and I was 14. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way it was back then, huh?
Yeah, it sure was.
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't
Well,
afford a
there's
gun. We couldn't afford a gun. Huh? Had to
Yeah.
borrow a gun because my parents couldn't buy me one. So
Yeah.
So that would have been around, if my math is correct, 1960 time frame or 61, something like that.
Exactly. 1960.
And
Fall of 1960.
And so, do you remember, those days you always hear about the heyday up here in the North Woods, how many deer there was because all the yards were still here. Were you ever coming up to this area in those days?
Oh yeah, for sure. I started during my college years when I would get breaks, and I talk about how when the processor was invented to cut the woods, that was the beginning of the downturn on the white-tailed deer in northern Maine. And of course, when I was a kid, and you remember this, Hal, too, back in the 60s and 70s, if you saw a coyote track, that was a big deal. If you saw a track,
Right.
like, wow, that's what I saw. I saw a coyote track. There were very, very few. And the woods hadn't been cut. You had beautiful stands of spruce and white cedar, and you didn't have the road system where there was one road when I was a young man. Now there's 20. The woods are just it's hard to get lost now up north.
Yeah, you can't get lost.
Yeah, you can't get lost. I mean, people get worried about getting lost. I said, good grief. I said, walk a half a mile or 3/4 mile, you're going to hit a road.
Yeah, you could. I tell
find it.
people, you could, if you just take a compass reading, so you walk a straight line. There's nowhere, I don't believe anywhere now, you could walk more than a few hours and not be out to a road, even if you were in the most remote part,
That's 100% the case, because I remember looking up north searching for different moose areas, and we're always looking for the most remote we can find. And when we started measuring distances, it's really a couple miles is about the most normally. I mean, there's a few probably exceptions, but a couple miles and you're hitting a road.
If you ever have an opportunity to get somebody in a float plane to take you up and fly over that country, you would see the maze of roads. It's not as bad around Jackman because the terrain kind of limits to a degree how many roads can be built.
Right, the mountains, they can't build them straight ahead like they do everywhere else.
But up in the county where it's a little bit flatter up there, and they're just I've done that. I've gone up and flown around just to kind of get a bird's eye view of the countryside, and it's just the network of roads is mind-boggling. And years ago, Joe, Al, Mike, the deer, they had a sanctuary because you didn't have the road network and the road system, so the deer could get away from hunting pressure very easily. So the average guy, he's going to go, maybe a half a mile off of a road. And in the old days, it was very easy to get away from people. And the deer had a sanctuary. They could get away from people.
Were you tracking back then, Jim?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I figured out pretty early on that you don't have to be real smart to figure if you cut a fresh track, there's a deer in front of you.
Right.
You may not see him. You may not see him, but you're going to get onto one. And I used to tell my clients, I said, follow a track even if it's an old one. If all you can find is an old track and it looks like it's a buck, follow it. He'll take it. You'll learn a lot just by following that track. You'll learn, where he's going, how he's traveling, and he'll take you to other deer.
Absolutely. So
He will
I'm just trying to catch up on because this is our first time talking, Jim. So I'm catching up on. Were you guiding before you met Hal then?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Hal, just to give you a little bit of history, I started out. I used to do bear and deer and a little bit of moose, and I guided for partridge and woodcock in Maine. And then in 2006, I actually came out to South Dakota to do a late-season archery mule deer hunt. Well, the outfitter, I was hunting in South Dakota, but he actually had most of his leases in Wyoming. Well, there were 8 of us in camp, and I was the only one. I was lucky enough to get a deer, and some of the other fellows started talking to the outfitter. Maine guides have a pretty good reputation outside of Maine. And so the outfitter, we got talking about one thing and another, and he said, hey, I could always use a good man. How'd you like to come out here and guide? And it worked perfectly for me because I would come out here, and from about mid-September through October, you can guide mule deer and antelope. And then I was able to get back home to Maine and guide deer in November, which is my passion. I enjoy guiding birds. I really don't like lugging baits with deer flies chewing on me. I really didn't like doing bear, but I mean I did it because I just tried to do as much guiding work as I can. But my first love was always deer hunting.
So when you started going, when you was hunting in the big woods, what area was you hunting in the beginning?
For years, there was a group of us. We would rent a camp and go back in the Allagash country.
Yep.
We hunted a lot around Saskis Lake, like a little northwest of Clayton Lake, up in Saskis Lake, Cunliffe Lake,
yep.
Hardin Brook. We did a little bit hunting around in the Squacook Lakes, but basically in the Allagash, and that was just wonderful deer country back in those days.
That was wild, wasn't it?
Oh my gosh, it truly was. It was as close as you could get to wilderness in the east. I mean, it's still big country, but it's all chopped up with roads now, and it's I hardly recognize it. It was a boreal forest, and now they've turned it into mostly hardwoods.
Yeah,
there's still some big deer yards up around the Little Black and places like that, but it's just been it's diminished considerably.
Yeah, there used to be deer yard all along the Allagash River there too, from Churchill up to wherever. Yeah.
So that was where I spent for years. That's where we went. We hunted back in that country, and you typically, I mean, if a guy hunted hard, in a week's time, you would typically see 10 or 12 deer, and if you saw 10 or 12 deer, 4 or 5 of them would be bucks.
Yeah.
If those 4 or 5 bucks, 2 or 3 of them would be big.
Yeah.
And we don't, this is just my observation, and just speaking in terms of the country that I have hunted in. When was it that we went to doe permits? How, 84, 85, something like that?
Yeah, that was mid-'80s, yeah.
Yeah, prior to then, you could shoot a buck or a doe. And remember when we had the northern zone and the southern zone, the tracks, the Great Northern Tracks.
Right.
Near Lincoln, north of that was the northern zone, and south of it was the southern zone, and the north was October 15th to November 30th.
Right.
And the south was a month of November.
Yeah, you could shoot does in the northern zone and not the southern. Remember that? The last 2 weeks of the season, you could take a doe in the northern zone.
Yeah.
I remember that when I was a kid going up there and getting my doe. Huh?
Oh, yeah, and remember when they used to say, "Did you get your deer?"
Yeah.
And then you'd say, "Yep," and they'd say, "Was it a big one?"
Yeah.
That's all. They didn't say, "Was it a buck? How many points?" Or this. Did you get your deer?
Yeah.
And yep. That's all they asked you.
Well, I was thinking about it the other day, and I think that's the biggest difference in northern and southern hunting. Growing up in the South, it was all about the rack. No one cared about the weight. But in the North, it was all about the weight because it was more meat. And I think from early on, it was more about sustenance more than it was about killing a trophy or whatever. It's just changed so much. So that's, I think, why the weight was always so important.
I'll tell you, here's a classic Maine story. This goes back in the early 70s. Back in the early 70s, there was a filling station in Ashland, Maine called Tibbetts. And they tagged deer there and they weighed them. So it was a Saturday night, and we had come out from our week of hunting. And there was a bunch of fellows at Tibbetts, and they were hanging up some big deer. So there was a guy there from New Jersey, and he'd shot a great big, I think it was a 10-point buck, and it I forget, it dressed 240 or 250, and there's 2 little kids there. And one guy, he's standing there just gloating. The fellow from New Jersey, he's gloating about his big deer. And these 2 boys, maybe 8 or 9 years old, they look at that deer, and the one boy turns to the other, and he says, "God, ain't that going to be a tough piece of meat?"
So true.
Yeah. His parents always told him, probably brought home a doe or something,
Yeah.
Well, it was so important back there, Jim, huh? To get your deer for the freezer in your family. It was a huge part of the winter. I mean, I can remember when Hal and I was kids, in southern Maine, there was no deer down there when we were kids, And if you got a deer every year, that was a big thing, and it was important to the family. It really was. I supplied for my mother, father, kids, aunt, uncles, everything. It was part of life back then,
Oh, yeah. It was
That
part
might
of life.
Yeah, that might involve getting more than one, though, right, Mike?
I wasn't going to be the one to say it. But that one deer you got, Mike, that went a long way.
He stretched it right out.
We talking moose or deer here?
Yeah, everybody in his family got a steak.
What's that called?
Well, I used to.
What's that called?
I used to-
They can't arrest you after a certain amount of time. What's that called?
Statute of
there we go.
limitations. Yeah, that's up.
Jim and I are in there.
Yeah.
Well, following with social media, following some of these pages out in Alaska, it still is that way out there in a big way, and especially with moose. I mean, everyone wants to get their moose to get through the winter.
Yeah, they don't buy meat out there or fish or anything.
Yeah. So,
I used to have a bunch of friends who were, I won't mention any names, but I used to have a bunch of friends. Hal and Mike, you know what a moose towner is, don't you?
A what?
A moose towner.
No, I never heard
that's
that
a
phrase.
new one.
Somebody if you're born in Allagash Village,
Yeah?
you're known as a moose towner.
Oh, no kidding. I never heard that.
Yeah. So I had some friends, and I won't mention any names, but I remember saying to it, I won't mention any names. He's passed on anyhow, but he, I think in 1980, wasn't it, that the moose season opened up?
That's
I
right.
think it was 1980.
yeah.
And I said, gee, Joe, his name wasn't Joe. I said, isn't it nice that they've opened up the moose season again? And he deadpan looked at me and said, didn't know it closed.
And he was being serious.
I think he was serious.
Of course he was.
Hey, everyone. Hal here. Just want to take a minute to talk about the Woodman Arms muzzleloader. We We got them all set on the website to build your own and or buy your Big Woods Bucks model, either one you want to do. But anyways, we've tested it a lot, and I can honestly say it's the most accurate muzzle loader on the market, best to carry in the Big Woods or anywhere else at 5.5 pounds. You can't go wrong with it. So get on there and check it out.
Hey guys, Joe here. Wanted to take a few minutes to talk about Lake Parlin Lodge. We're a 4-season lodge located just south of Jackman. We've got cabins, lodge rooms, mini lodge. We're a big snowmobile destination in the winter, full restaurant, bar, all the amenities that you need for your trip. Open obviously through the summer, right on the lake. Kayaks, canoes, all included with the cabin. We also do a lot of weddings, so if you're looking for a destination wedding, we can do a wedding up to 200 people. And, of course, we've got our hunting season, moose season, deer season. So check us out. We're at lakeparlinlodge.com.
The point being to that story is it was about the meat for the family. It was an important part of just part of the lifestyle.
Yeah. So Jim, you shot your first buck at 12. Was that down near where you grew up, or when did you start hunting? Did you go up north for that?
No, that was up north. That was up north.
So you went up north right from the time you started hunting then?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I've never hunted. The farthest south I've ever hunted is Jackman. I've never hunted.
Wow.
I did hunt around. That's down
That's
in the
quite
tropics.
a stat.
Yeah.
Yep. It's down in the tropics, Jackman.
Yeah.
Hunted around Millinocket, but I did hunt around Millinocket once, which I guess is just about the same.
Yeah.
Millinocket's about the same latitude as Jackman.
Yep.
Right.
I've never hunted down south. I've never had the desire, because to me the biggest part of it is just I want to be by myself. I want to get on a track, and you fellows feel the same way. I want to get on a track and know that the chances of somebody else getting onto it are pretty slim. Not impossible, but slim.
Yeah. Right.
I want to be able to wander as far as I want to go, and know that I don't have to worry about anybody else interfering with what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
So yeah. It's and even out here, it's still pretty easy out here to be by yourself, because I've learned. I'll digress for a minute. I've learned out here in this country, the road hunters, they'll go maybe a mile, maybe a little bit more. The horse guys, the guys on horseback, they'll go back in 8 or 10 miles to hunt deer and elk. So there's that area 2 or 3 miles in that the horse guys ride past and the road hunters won't go, and you've got it all to yourself.
Oh, yeah. Good way to look
Whether
at
you're
it.
hunting deer, whether you're hunting mule deer or elk, you've got it all to yourself.
Yeah.
Is that a draw state for elk, or is it over the counter?
Well, for me, for residents, deer and elk are over the counter, but it's a draw. For non-residents, everything is a draw. But I can buy deer and elk tags every year and just go hunt, which is kind of nice.
So Jim,
And I have.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jim. Go ahead.
I have friends who have horses who, if I shoot an elk, particularly, if you shoot a deer, you can quarter it and pack it out piecemeal. But the big thing out here, fellas, is it's no joke. My wife doesn't like me hunting alone because of the grizzly.
Right.
There's more bears. There's a greater density of grizzly here than there is in Alaska.
No kidding.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of bears here. I mean, it's no joke. If you kill a critter, you absolutely you can't leave anything behind, because if you don't pack it all out in one trip and you come back, there's not a question of will there be a bear on it. It's just when.
Yeah.
What do you carry for a sidearm?
44 Magnum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They say those
fact-
those grizzlies have learned to key in on the bullet, on the shots. They know there's going to be at least a gut pile or something there.
Oh yeah. It's true. It's absolutely true. Last fall, this will make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Last fall, it was the first week of November, and we'd had about 2 or 3 inches of snow overnight, and it was about 4 or 5 degrees. It was a good cold morning, and it cleared off. It was sunny, just the kind of day that you dream about having. So I thought to myself, I know a place I'm going to go, and I'm going to see. I've not yet been able to track a muley buck and shoot it. So I said, I'm just going to see if I can find a track that looks right. So I was hunting a place called Mormon Creek, about 15 minutes from the house, and I got off and went maybe half a mile, and I cut a big track, and I could tell by the looks of the track that, you know, he wasn't on a mission. He was picking a little bit on some serviceberry, and he was meandering. I said, this bugger looks like he's looking for a place to bed. So he started wandering and picking his way, and he headed up into some heavy timber, crossed a creek. And I followed him, and then he started to circle. I think he knew something was behind him, because he made a loop and cut his own track. And so I'm following, looking at my tracks, and I cut my own tracks. And in my tracks, following my tracks, was a grizzly track.
Holy cow!
And I said, you know what? I'm not a coward, but I'm not a fool either. So I got out of there. Bear was actually following my tracks.
Wow.
That'll get you. My wife doesn't like me. I try not to hunt alone. My wife doesn't like me going alone. Of course, you know, I'm stubborn. Imagine that. Imagine a man who's stubborn and doesn't listen to his wife.
I can't. Well, that was my question, Jim. I was going to ask you, are you tracking bucks out there?
That's I've been trying to.
Yeah, okay.
We don't have. We've got a lot of whitetails in places in Wyoming. We don't have any whitetails at all where I am. But I can go. You can go maybe 30 miles east of here, 30 or 40 miles east of here, and you get into some farming country. But that's all private land down there, and it's not conducive to tracking, because the deer in the west, as you fellas probably know, in large part they're along the river bottoms. That's where you find the whitetails. That's where the habitat is good, and there's parts of Wyoming that are just rotten with whitetails. I guided one year up around Sheridan, which is north central Wyoming, and it'd be nothing to see 300 or 400 deer in a day. I've never seen anything quite like it.
Just like the Allagash back in the day, right?
Just like the Allagash back in the day.
Hey, I'm sitting here thinking about because I love hearing about tracking and hunting the big woods back in the the years that you were doing it, the 60s and 70s. Did you take many pictures back then?
No, very few. You know, we didn't have we just didn't have the technology, of course, and I don't think I have very many pictures. I might be able to dig up some somewhere. I think half of the big bucks I shot, I didn't even take any pictures of them.
Yeah, I know. Whenever someone posts up, you see on some of these sites, people post the pictures from the old days, and everyone loves looking back at the early days and hunting back then. And the other thing I was wondering is, so in the 70s when you guys were up there tracking, before it was kind of well known, it was probably just known here within the state. Was it surprising to you when it was when Larry Benoit came out in the magazines and then his book and all that stuff?
Not at all. I thought, gee, isn't that the way? That's the way you hunt deer in the north, and that's the way you hunt them.
Yeah, nothing new to you, huh?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that was that's how you hunted deer. That's what deer hunting was. It was and still is the most effective way, in my opinion, because as I said, if you stick with it, and Hal talks about this in his books, a fella has to. It's a mental game. It really is. It's a mental game, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but you fellas know it. You have to be mentally tough. You have to really want it, and you have to be persistent and stick with it. You can't be worrying about, am I going to get lost, or I've got to do this when I get home. You need to be totally focused on the mission at hand, and that's the key to success. Anybody can do it if they work at it, and if they really want it badly enough. I kind of draw an analogy between, I love to hunt mountain sheep, and mountain sheep requires mental toughness. You need to be in shape, but you have to really want it badly. And I think it's the same thing with tracking big bucks. You have to be determined that, by golly, I'm going to follow this bugger. When I was a young fella, I used to, if I was on a track, I'd stay out all night. I wasn't married back then when I was a kid. When I was a young man. I wasn't married when I was in my 20s, and I would just stay out all night.
Really?
Just pick up a track, build myself a little fire, and I was always prepared. I'd always carried a pack. Years ago, guys didn't carry a pack. I always carried a pack, and I had a space blanket in there, and I had extra water, and I had a couple of candy bars, and I would take 2 sandwiches and eat one. I'd always keep the one in case I, wound up spending the night out there. I'd always keep one. And it was easy to build a fire. I mean, all the guy needed was to have some waterproof matches or a Bic lighter, just find yourself some birch bark, and, you're all set.
I always wondered if there was anyone that would do that, camp out overnight on a track. And I've never actually talked to anyone that did, so that's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
That is die hard as it gets.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. I was crazy. I was just absolutely crazy for it.
So, how old was you when you shot your first 200-pound buck?
19.
19, yeah.
19 years old.
That's a good early start.
Yeah, he was an 8-pointer, dressed 212 pounds. I mounted him, and I'll tell you what, I was elated to say the least. And,
yeah. You'd really arrived then, huh?
Oh, yeah. And, it gets to be, I don't know how many I've shot. Not as many as you, Hal. Maybe 15. I could, over 200 pounds, I could figure it out. Yeah, actually, it's interesting. One of my clients, my biggest buck, dressed at 247. He was a 10-point. And I actually had a client that killed one bigger than that. He killed one dressed 263. That was back in 2008. I had a client kill one dressed 263.
Yeah, nice.
And I've killed a bunch between, in that 215 to 230 range. And I killed one in Ontario dressed at 244. So he was a bruiser.
But that's where most of the 200-pound bucks are between 200 and 225 or 230. I mean, once you start getting above 240 and 250, that's a real small percentage,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I know some of the years here, well, especially recently after the bad winters we had there in 2010, I mean, you'd look in the Maine Sportsman and like the top 10, the biggest one might be 260, and it went down, some of them went down almost in the 240s in the top 10,
Yeah. And I think, too, Hal, don't you think, it depends on when you shoot them, too, sometimes. I shot a buck near Masardis on a place called, you know where Masardis is? It's between Patton, just south of Ashland.
Yeah.
And we used to hunt on a place called Pollard Mountain. And, 1 year back, I even remember the year 1972, there were 6 of us, and we killed 5 bucks in a week. And we saw 11, between the 6 of us, we saw 11 deer, and 9 of them were bucks.
Nice.
That's a good week.
Yeah.
That poor sap that didn't get one.
Yeah, and the smallest one, the baby dressed at 168 pounds. That was the little guy.
Yeah.
The other three of them were over 200, and one was in the 180s.
Yeah.
But it was, well, I'm getting around to my point. It was Thanksgiving week, and the buck I killed dressed at 209 pounds.
Yeah.
And he didn't have a scrap of fat on him. Not a scrap of it. He'd just been run ragged. His hips were, how his in front of his hips were kind of hollowed out because all he'd been doing was running.
Right.
Now, if you'd have shot him the first week in November, he'd have probably weighed, 225 or 230 or something like that.
Oh, I think even more. I bet that was one that was be up around 240. They lose 30 pounds easy by then because I know you can tell by the track sometimes too, Jim. When you get a buck that's a 200-pound track or better, and I've shot a couple of them recently. There was 2 years in a row I shot one. One was 195, and next year was 196, and they were both. One was Thanksgiving Day, and one was the day after. But those bucks would be the 225, as early in the season.
Yeah.
And that one I shot, I call him the hog buck there. He dressed 260, but that was the first week. It was like Wednesday or Thursday of the first week.
Yeah.
And then I shot one the middle of muzzleloader season, I call the king, and that buck was a bigger buck. He was a bigger bodied buck, and he weighed 220 in, I don't know, 3rd or 4th of December or something. And that was one that I would say would have to go like 275 or something earlier,
Yeah. But you know how in 2012 I shot a 9-point muzzleloader week, and he dressed at 233.
Wow.
That
Nice.
was muzzleloader.
Yeah,
cow.
that's a
Yeah.
So are all these like that one in 2009 and the one you're talking? Those are all way up north again.
Yeah, that's all up in the county.
Yeah.
All of them. Yeah, all up in the county.
Yeah.
I've never actually hunted. I say that I've hunted around Jackman. I've actually never hunted. I just guided for Hal around Jackman. I never actually hunted myself around Jackman. I think there's more deer down there. Just generally speaking, I think that today, I'm talking about more recent history, the past 10 or 15 years. There seems to be more deer down around that, especially over towards the border there. How do you still have that lease, Hal? Did you keep that? The one I used to guide out of, the East Camp?
Yeah, oh yeah.
You still have,
I still have that, and now those guys all just, basically, they've all learned that there's no guide in there anymore, They just, it's the same bunch of guys, Ed and Dan and them, they still take 2 weeks. And the second week crew, they're all pretty much the same guy. I had it turn over once about 4 or 5 years ago. The guys from Maine had the first week. They bought a camp in over by Eustis somewhere, so I just refilled that. But yeah,
I think the winters were hard up north on them, worse than here, and put a number on them.
Well, that and the deer yards too they're just. I think mostly now you probably would agree with this, Jim, is if you get around the peripheral of the state, especially up the west side, and where a lot of those deer, most of them all go to Canada to yard up where the climate's quite a bit milder over there. That seems to be why there's more deer in that strip than if you get like right in the middle of the North Maine Woods now,
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, there's just no deer yards left. I mean, it's just been devastating. And remember, when I was a young man, white cedar was junk. They didn't cut it.
Right.
They had no, there was no use for it. And of course, then when they started making cedar shakes for siding and roofing, they didn't bother. Of course, white cedar is prime winter, not only habitat but feed for the deer.
Right.
And they didn't cut it. It was considered junk.
Yeah. Well, they're making up for that now up there, Jim.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! It's really. I guess I'm sounding nostalgic and waxing poetically, but it breaks my heart to see what's happened to it, and it can't come back. It's just.
Well,
it's just.
It took a long time to grow it, so we ain't going to see it in our lifetimes.
Yeah, not in our lifetime, anyhow.
We've been lucky,
but
Jim.
there's still some good hunting. I mean, the last year that I guided for you, Hal, was I think 2012. It was just you sold Cedar Ridge in 2014, I think.
13 would have been
13.
Yeah, December.
I think 2012, and I used to keep notes. I would make notes of what I saw, where I saw it, what time of day. And I'm an old-fashioned guy. I had a little notebook that I carried in my pack. And that last year, I guided all 4 weeks for Hal. I saw 37 deer in a 4-week period.
Wow.
Yep.
That's doing well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any big ones?
Well, no, I didn't. I didn't see any big ones.
Yeah.
Saw some small bucks, but I didn't see anything big.
So
what I would do is I would take, I'd usually take, Hal would give us 3 guys, and I would take one with me if he wanted to and send the other 2 out. If all 3 of them wanted to sit, of course, I was always looking. So I would see more deer than my hunters oftentimes because I was covering a lot of country.
So going back to your early days hunting, do you ever hunt with any of the guys that you were hunting with back then, or?
A few of them, yeah. A few of them have remained friends, but they've all given up on northern Maine. They've all given up on it because, they say that there's a saying that the hunting's better just about any place you can think of than northern Maine, if all you care about is seeing quantities of deer. And,
right.
But there's still a market for it. I mean, there are guys, and I think thanks to Big Woods bucks, there's still a market. There's guys who want that North Woods experience.
Yeah, for sure.
The tougher the challenge, the bigger the reward.
Oh yeah, I mean there's no question about it.
Yeah, so Jim, when you're going to come back and come out here and guide for Big Woods Outfitters anyways?
Well,
not to put you on the spot.
Well, maybe next year. Maybe next year. I'd like to. I miss it. I really do. I miss it.
Yeah, we can use you.
Yeah, Jim, he's pulling all us old farts out of retirement, and putting us back, and we're guiding again.
Yeah.
So
you're not as old as me, Mike.
No, I'm a couple years behind you, but yeah, come on out and you and I'll be the geriatric team. We can go out now and see a lot of deer every year, and the bucks. We're getting some nice bucks again. So you'll be happy here again.
Yeah. You probably, I don't know. You probably heard us. I've talked about it and stuff, but they tagged 30 bucks in town last fall that were over 200.
Yeah.
And that's out of I think they tagged 105 or 6, so it was like 1 in every 3.5 bucks tagged was over 200.
Excellent.
Yeah, we haven't seen that for a while, huh?
Hey, Hal here. Just want to take a minute to talk about the hunting club. And you can join by going right online at bigwoodsbucks.com. But anyways, I've got all my information is going in there. And it's a place where you can get together and look at my films, tips, writings, and all of that. And the best part is there's forums for you to communicate with, the rest of the club members, talk about Big Woods stuff and all of that. So anyways, $36 a year, cheaper than getting a Starbucks once a day. So join up and hope you see you're on there. Yeah.
Now you're basing out of Joe's place, right?
Yeah.
For your
Yeah, we got.
Are you going to hunt? You going to hunt some of that country, or
not
are
me?
you going to go up? Yeah.
I'll probably stick around this neighborhood a little bit.
Joe likes it down here, but it I don't know. I'll stick up my way, up places I know. It's not too. It ain't that. Not that it's that far. It's only 10 miles to town. But the reason I never came down this way, Jim, was because from the time I came up, it was owned by Scott Paper Company, and they always cut harder, and there was lots of clear cuts and stuff, And I just thought it was ugly for deer hunting. I just never could get into that open stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't care for that either.
Yeah, and at that time, and it's not quite the same, but there was lots of places, up north of town and stuff that hadn't still been opened up much. I mean, they'd been cut, back in the 50s and 60s, but there was still lots of those old hardwood ridges. It's like, I call it like stepping back in time. All you'd see in the woods was them old cart roads or the old bulldoze roads from the 60s.
Yeah.
And I just liked hunting in that woods, Yeah. So I never come down this way. I like the woods, and that's what I stuck with,
Yeah. I always liked, of course, my favorite was your old East remote camp.
Yeah.
But I always liked that country around that Beaver Pond country and all in that country. That's good country in there.
Mike's
never heard of it.
Yeah, Mike's giving me the hairy eyeball like I showed you that.
I stumbled onto it, Mike.
There's no deer in there, Jim, so no reason to go up there.
No deer. Don't bother going in there. If I come east, don't bother going up there.
You should have seen the look on Mike's face when you said that.
Yeah.
I tried to get up there to get some trail cameras because we got so much snow up here. We couldn't get in the woods there the second week in November, huh? So I had some trail cameras. They've been there all year. Well, one happens to be Joe's. So I was going up there. I was going up the Beaver Pond yesterday, but I couldn't get up the road.
So starting back from when you started out, what did you use as a firearm in the early days, and did you change, or what do you hunt with now when you track?
For years, I mentioned how I killed my first deer with a 30-30. Boy, I just wanted to have one of those in the worst possible way. So my mom and dad said, we'll make a deal with you. If you keep at least a B+ average, there just might be 30-30 under the Christmas tree. That's when I was 15. Well, when you're a kid, you just dangle a carrot in front of him. And I did a lot better. I was always I was a decent student, but not great, but I was always decent. Well, that's all the incentive I need. So I got my 30-30, and I killed my first 10 or 12 deer with that. And never thought I'd need another gun. Never, ever thought. I thought, boy, I've got my old 94, and it was an old pre-64 model 94. Never thought I'd need another gun. Well, then I got to where, unlike Hal, I do like low-power scopes. So I graduated from a 30-30. I got a 1 year for my birthday. My parents and a couple of my buddies chipped in and bought me an old a Browning BLR lever action 308.
Yep.
Yep, got one of those.
So yeah, one of the old ones mine's made in Belgium. It's before they started making them in Japan. And I carried that for, oh my gosh, I carried that for a number of years. But now, unlike a lot of Northwoods guys, I've become a bolt action guy. I have a pre-64 Model 70 featherweight in 270, and I carry that, and I really like it. And, I'm pretty fast, pretty good with a bolt, but I've never been a pump action guy, either a lever action or a bolt. And of course, out here, everything is a bolt action rifle out here.
Right. When was the last year you hunted Maine?
2014 was the last year.
Does sound like it's time for a trip back.
Yeah, my wife thinks I'm nuts, but I do miss it. Yeah, she says I think you're crazy. But
Well,
I'd love to do it. I'm hoping to, because I'll tell you, I don't mean to embarrass him, but I think the world of Hal Blood.
He's all right.
Fine. He's a good guy. He's a good guy, and he's the real deal. And I think the world of him. And he's always been he's been great to work for. He when you know what you're doing, Hal, just do your thing.
Yeah, I could echo that sentiment. It's funny you always say the real deal, because that's usually the same description I use for Hal, for guys that don't know him, and you spend a little time with him and you realize he has a pretty good idea what he's talking about.
Hang on just a minute. I got to take my hat out a notch here. My head's swelling up.
It can't get. But well, I love hearing the stories about the old days and about back when it was. I mean, Hal goes back a pretty good ways, but you got him beat.
Yeah,
and, it is. I mean, it's. You can never get too caught up in it, because you're one day going to look back at these days or the guys this age and say this was the good old days. But it always seems like we look back and wish we were in that time, and I definitely feel that way about deer hunting in the Northwoods back then.
Well, and of course, I was young. We were all young. We could do anything. You couldn't tell us we couldn't do it. If you told us we couldn't do it, we say, "You just watch me." I'll tell a little story about that. I mentioned earlier how the 6 of us killed 5 bucks on Pollard Mountain. Well, the way we did it was we had to park right off Route 11. We had our vehicles parked right there, and there was an old winter road that went back into where they were going to cut, and they hadn't cut it yet. They had just cut the winter road. Well, the winter road was so rough, and you couldn't drive it with four-wheel drive. We had to walk. We walked back in 2.5 miles to the area we were hunting, because Pollard Mountain itself is about 2.5 miles off of Route 11. The road was so rough that we had to pole all the deer out. We carried them on a pole, lashed ropes. You've seen the old pictures of them, and then we figured out pretty quick. We got smart. And we figured, boy, if you get out of step, if the guy in front is out of step with the guy in back, that deer starts to swing.
Right.
And bounce, and boy, that's bouncing on your shoulder. So we built a litter so that 4 of us, because then we started, as I said, 3 of the bucks were over 200 pounds. They were all big, even 168 pounds. That's a heavy deer, particularly when you have to tote him 2.5 miles out to the road. We built a litter, and that way we get 4 of us. But my point is, the road was so rough, you couldn't even pull them across the road. As I mentioned, it was Thanksgiving week, so all that muddy mess was frozen and jagged. You'd have torn a deer up. You drag a deer 2.5 miles. I mean, you're just going to rub off all the hide and probably bruise the meat. So we built a litter and carried him out on that.
Yep.
And, that's been almost 50 years ago, and I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
And we old timers, we always used to build. I remember for some of my clients how I would build a lunch fire. We would get together around 11, 12 o'clock, and I'd build a fire, and we would toast our sandwiches, and I would boil coffees. Well, these guys, they thought, man, that's the coolest thing in the world. And I said, well, geez, I've always done this.
Yeah.
It's always what I did was build a fire at noontime and, get together with your buddies and say, what did you see? What did you see? And, a hot lunch kind of it lifted your spirits a little bit too. And that was all part of the deal, was that lunch fire and just getting together. And I have all the clients I did it for loved it, and they'd never heard of doing such a thing. Well, I said, well, gee, I always did.
Yeah.
Always have. Always did.
You you were talking before, we talked about the roads and how it's changed and you can't get lost. And then you were talking about how you can't be thinking about getting lost and keeping on the track and you got to be focused. But I try to think about what it was like up there without the roads, and being that, we have GPS now to rely on, so we don't have to think about it. But when all you had was your compass, that was a whole different deal than, tracking.
Oh, yeah.
No roads to... I think about it now, if you had a road that just went in and dead-ended like you're talking about, and there was nothing for 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 miles in one direction, you could really get messed up if you didn't know what you were doing.
Oh, yeah. And you really had to know how to read a topo map and understand. You really had to understand what you were looking at to know where you were, because that's all you had. And, of course, back in those days, the topo maps that I used to use back in the 70s, a lot of them were printed and drawn up in the 40s and 50s.
Yes, they were. They were made in the 40s. You're right, Jim. I remember that.
Yeah. But you didn't have, what roads were shown on there there weren't too many changes to the road system because the road system was at a minimum. And you could find, of course, you'd find these old tote roads that would give you some access to the ridges and to swampy areas, because it went back I'll tell you how old I am. I can remember the last river drive in 1978. I can remember when there was a few guys who were teamsters. They handled the horses. When they would skid, they would skid the logs out off of an old tote road. They'd skid them out with horses.
Yeah, Of course, back then too, Jim, is all the wood was cut in the winter. They didn't cut wood in the summer. It all went out in the winter and went out, down the rivers, and that was the end of it till the next winter, right? So those roads through the woods, they were more like, they just mucked out roads,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I missed a part of that, Jim. That was 18 what?
Listen to Grandpa over here is going to crack on you.
Shortly after the Civil War. I was 12.
Yeah. So, Jim, how old was you when you started guiding?
I started guiding part-time. I was, I think it was 50. I was 50 years old.
Oh, yeah.
Started guiding part-time.
Yeah.
Got my guide license. I would use vacation time to do it.
Right.
And I wish that I had started earlier, because I think if I had started earlier, I always wanted to have a remote tent camp back in the Allagash, and nobody did that.
Right.
No one. There was a few camps. There was 1 or 2 commercial sporting camps, but not many. And I think there would have been some opportunities. And of course, back then, you could have. The season was 6 weeks long up north.
Right.
So you could have gone back in there and set up a camp. And I used to hunt out of a canoe also, and that could be a very effective way to hunt. The hunting is tough up north. So what I always tried to do as a guide, Hal, was make it an experience for your clients.
Right.
Yep.
They may not kill a deer, but make it an experience. Make them say, boy, I didn't kill a deer, but by golly, I can't wait until next year. I'm going back.
Yeah,
because next year will be the year.
Yeah, those are the people I always talk about. You either love it or you hate it up in the big woods. And
oh, yeah.
So if you make the experience, people will come back. You know what I mean? It's just...
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Because there's more to it than just just killing that buck, all the things they see and the experiences and all of that. That's all the trip,
I mean, sitting and you can sit and watch a field, and that's probably going to be more effective. But what's going to be most memorable, if you don't kill a deer, there's not going to be much of a memory about it.
Right.
Whereas you go up north, and I took some guys in a canoe one time, and they thought that was the coolest thing. They thought that was the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah.
We didn't see any deer. We saw moose while we were, but also it gave you access to country that was otherwise inaccessible.
Right.
By canoe.
What water? What were you floating on that hunt, Jim? What waterway?
That was on the Allagash.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's so many dead waters and everything up in that country. When I used to hunt in Haynesville, you know where that is, and we used to, geez, all those old dead waters, huh? You'd float those in the morning, and you'd always see a couple of deer out on those dead waters.
There was one just west of where Gail and I lived called Lepompkeg Stream, and there was a big dead water there. And I killed some big bucks in there, and nobody hunted that country at all because it was swampy. You couldn't get into it easily. There's no roads into it, no way to get in there. And I'd go in there in a canoe, and boy, that was just a whole different world.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, and that was just 10 miles, well, less than 10 miles west of where I lived.
So were you actually shooting them out of the canoe, or were you just using the canoe to get access in there?
Just to get access.
Okay.
Just to get access to the country. Yeah.
That does sound like a good time, though.
Oh yeah, it was an awful lot of fun, it really was, and again gave you an experience. Precious memories, I'll tell you, precious memories.
Yeah, your clients remember that stuff, Jim. They remember you pointing out there's a moose, and here's a moose track, and here's some hair where they laid, and you find an antler, and you see a bobcat, and you see an eagle, and the people that's the best part of the journey sometimes,
Oh, absolutely.
So you said you guided some moose hunts also over the years?
Yeah, I didn't do a whole lot of that. Didn't do a whole lot of moose guiding because when I first started doing it, I was already old. I've been old for a long time. Been old for a while.
Yeah, but you get around. You still get around better than most young people, Jim. You're spry.
That was
and
my next line.
You're in shape. And
I'll tell you how it's pretty shocking to me how bad people are.
Yeah.
I see it out here. We'll be stalking an antelope, and sometimes we'll have to move pretty quick. I was saying, listen, we don't have to run, but we got to move pretty quick. And guys half my age first of all, too many of them are overweight, and they don't do anything.
Right.
And hunting, particularly, hunting big woods bucks or hunting out in this country, it's an athletic pursuit. But not many people look at it that way. They don't think of it as an athletic endeavor, and that actually is.
Right, for sure.
I mean, no question about it. If you track a buck 10 or 12 miles in one day, you've got to be in shape to do it again the next day, and the day after that, if need be, and the day after that.
Yep.
So it's pretty sad, and I've broken my back twice on horses, but I refuse to let it stop me. I won't. I just refuse to let it stop me.
Yeah, you're doing good from that now, all recovered?
Hal, I have chronic pain, but I just live with it. It's not bad enough for surgery.
Right.
I just live with it. I just deal with it. I'm not going to let it stop me because I hope I've got a few years left in me to climb these hills and maybe do some tracking and some guiding for Hal Blood. I think I have a few years left in me.
Yeah. After this goes on the air, there'd be people calling up wanting to book you for a guide.
Exactly.
I'll tell you, a great inspiration to me was in 2016, I was up hunting stone sheep in northern British Columbia, and we actually stayed in a cabin. We went out on horses anywhere from 10 to 15 miles a day to hunt, and on the, folks would write on the wall and the ceiling of the cabin, they would write down what they had seen and who their guide was and how old they were. Well, there's a woman who wrote I can't remember her last name. Her name was Mavis something or other. She was from Anchorage, Alaska, and she killed a stone sheep when she was 78 years old.
Wow.
God bless her.
So I said, by golly, if she can do it, I can do it. And you just have to think. You just have to keep thinking forward. My neighbor here, who does our plowing, he's 77 years old. You know what he did? He went out and bought himself a new tractor with a blower on it and a blade. And I said, his name is Bill. I said, Bill, I like your thinking. You're not thinking about dying. You bought a new tractor. You're thinking about all the plowing you have to do. He said, dying? He said, I don't have time for that.
Have you hunted Alaska, Jim?
I have. Yes, I have.
What did you hunt there?
I've hunted Dall sheep twice. I hunted grizzly, and I went to Kodiak Islands twice for Sitka black-tailed deer. And some of my buddies said, "Are you crazy going to Alaska to hunt deer?" I said, that's not the point. It's not a deer hunt. It's a deer hunting adventure.
Did you do it off? Did you do it off the boat?
Yeah, I did it on my own. Yep, did it on my own. They have what's called a transporter, and you can hunt deer. Actually, you can hunt deer, caribou, and moose without a guide.
Yeah, that was actually why I was asking, because I'm doing I'm going to go moose hunting out there a year from this September. So
yeah,
I didn't know if you had done that yet. I was going to pick your brain a little bit on the moose.
No, I haven't done moose, Joe. I've done Sitka black-tailed deer on my own, which is an experience I would highly recommend.
So did you do it from the water with a boat, or?
We had a transporter, and they would, we stayed in a lodge, and they provided meals, and then they take you out, and they drop you off.
Okay.
And you hunt on your own. And then at a pre-assigned time, they'll come back and pick you up and take you back to the lodge.
Okay. Was that when you could, I think it was, four of them that you could kill? 4 tags a person, or is it back?
You can get 3 now, as far as I know. You can shoot 3 bucks. I went one year, and my wife went with me, actually. She didn't hunt, but she went with me. And we hunted for 5 days. I only saw about 20 deer. And I killed 1 buck and decided I won't kill another one unless I see one bigger, and I didn't. Well, come to find out, that was on the heels of 3 severe winters. I went back 4 years later, and the first morning I saw 19 bucks.
They rebound quickly there.
Yeah, that was on the heels of 4 good winters back to back to back. So that herd booms, and it's like, you fellows have heard of Anacostia Island up off the Gaspé Peninsula.
Yep.
The same thing. That herd will boom and bust and boom and bust. So the second time I went to Kodiak was after 4 mild winters in a row, and my gosh, I could have been finished by 9 o'clock the first morning. I could have killed 2 bucks. But of course, I didn't want to do that. But
sounds like an adventure, though.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Once you go to Alaska, you won't go to Alaska once.
No, I've already told my wife that. Be prepared. And Hal and I have got to do it together too. So I've definitely got to go back a second time.
No, he doesn't know anything about hunting moose.
Yeah.
You'll have to show him, Joe. You'll have to give him.
Give him some pointers. Yeah, I'll bring him right up to speed.
Yeah.
Yeah. You hunted sheep up there, haven't you, Hal?
Yeah, I went twice with Mike Featherstone there, and both times I was kind of a victim of circumstance of the weather. It got real hot both times. Mike thought I was a jinx or something, and out of the 2, we're supposed to go on 10-day hunts. I hunted a total of 8-9 days total, and the weather was extremely hot, and them sheep had gone way up into those craggy places where you can't get to them, just to get cool. So that was it, but it was fun.
Yeah.
Still thinking I need to shoot one of them, so we'll see.
Oh, yeah. Well, is Mike still guiding up there?
Yeah, he's actually, there's a couple of guys bought the lodge over there on Iliamna that he worked at some, and they took a shine to him. So he's been in all summer, he's been working on the lodge, upgrading things and building new things. And then, they have kind of limited guiding. They got the brown bear, and but he wants them to get into sheep and moose and do flyouts because the guys both have their own planes and all of that. So they're trying to build it up again. And then now he goes down. They also own a ranch in Kansas, so they got him down there in the winter working on that ranch. So he's got a pretty good gig going. He didn't even come back here to Maine this past fall.
Oh, no? Oh, okay.
No, he did. He was in Kansas right through till just before Christmas, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Good deal.
Well, we're kind of running out of time here, Jim. But if you got some words of wisdom to the newbies that want to hunt the big woods, what you have to say to them?
Oh, do it.
Just do it.
You should coin that phrase, Jim.
Just do it.
Yeah, just Nike it, boys. Just Nike it. Oh, come on up. You'll. I think once you do it once, you'll want to come back again and again and again.
I think you got to try to make a trip this year just to warm up for guiding the following year, Jim. You ought to try to sneak over here for a few days.
Yeah. I'd love to come over there for the. When is the meeting? I guess late June, Hal?
Yeah, the
22nd,
22nd, I think it is, right here at the lodge. Yep.
Yeah, I wish I could make it, but it's probably not going to be in the cards. But no, I would. My suggestion would be if you want to have a real deer hunting experience, if you want to have the pinnacle of fair chase hunting. A lot of talk about fair chase hunting right now. Hunt those North Woods bucks. That you'll have a true fair chase hunting experience, and it'll be the most gratifying. If you're successful, it'll be the most gratifying experience you'll ever have in your deer hunting career. And
Yep. Good words,
Jim. I've really enjoyed it talking to you today. I look forward to meeting you.
Joe.
Hope you make it up
Mike,
soon.
are you asleep, Mike?
No, I'm still here. They only let me talk once in a while, Jim. They point at me. They go ahead.
I know. Sometimes we old guys we nod off.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Mike's been doing. His eyes been shut the whole time.
I've been wiping drool off his face.
and then you said Beaver Pond, and I jerked to attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
I stumbled onto that on my own, Mike.
Yeah. Okay.
How many guys are going to have their atlas out looking for beaver pond? There's probably 15 of them in the state.
Oh, there's 100 beaver ponds.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great, Jim. Great talking to you, buddy. I haven't talked to you for like 10 years, have I? Jeez, it was great talking to you.
It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. All right.
I don't know if anybody's going to learn anything, but
Yes, I'm sure they did. And the fun part was just reminiscing about the old days. I felt like I got cheated. I didn't get up here as quick as you did. You started right from the beginning. I was like 22, 23 when I first come up north to hunt. So I got cheated a little bit out of it.
Yeah.
So, okay then. Thanks again, Jim, and good talking with you. And say hi to your wife for us. And
will do.
hey, thanks for tuning in. Till next time, good luck on the trail.